My name is Phil. I just want to welcome everyone to our conversation group tonight. I'm with Indivisible Las Cruces. Thank you very much. So we all know who Indivisible is. And if you want more information, you should be able to find out about the national organization. So this evening, our conversation education night, we're going to have Peter Goodman, who is the program host at KTAL. He's also a novelist here. ¿Qué tal? Sí. And he will be introducing our panelists this evening. So take it away, Peter. Thank you very much. We'll also have question and answers, and I've got the microphone at that point.
What a great turnout.
Yes.
The title is Indivisible Panel on Faith, Democracy, and Christian Nationalism. We only allowed whoever made up the schedule 10 minutes at the end for questioning. I'm hoping we can all get through what we're doing faster, rather than slower, and make more time for questioning. Our panelists, whom I'll tell you a little about in a moment, are Bill McCamley, Pastor Amy Wilson Feltz, Efrain Belmontes, Pastor Adolfo Calvario, Reverend Ali Casey Bell, United Universalist, Father Jim Lehman of Holy Family American Catholic Church, and Zach Egan. And just so you know what's coming, they've divided into sort of, after a brief intro, sort of three segments. First round is what is Christian nationalism? Second is impacts of it on democracy and community. And the third, which interests me the most, is what can we do about it? And then question period. Having said that, Bill McCamley will be familiar to a lot of you. He's a longtime resident who was actually born in Busan, South Korea, attended NMSU and then the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard for his master's in public policy, has returned here and held several public offices. And he's also written a book recently. He's recently been paying a lot of attention to trying to help communications between men and women. His book is called Right, My Dudes, Now What? And it explores questions around masculinity in the 21st century, addresses toxic masculinity, societal change, equity, and how men relate to progressive politics. He's in the middle over here. Nope, I'm introducing everybody and then we'll get to the first topic and have people come up in the order that I suggest. Amy Wilson Feltz is lead pastor at Morning Star UMC. She's in the middle over here. Her pastoral role involves leading worship, preaching weekly sermons, providing spiritual care to the congregation. Morning Star emphasizes community connection, care ministries, and inclusion. Prior to becoming pastor at Morning Star in 2021, she was the pastor at St. Paul's United Methodist Church in El Paso, and prior to that, an associate pastor at a church in Abilene. Pastor Efrain Belmontes, who's directly to my left, currently serving as lay supply pastor at El Calvario United Methodist Church. He leads ministry and congregation, and of course that church is famous for helping a lot of immigrants and also for food assistance to people, and does a lot of good work in the community. Furthest away from me over there is Father Jim Lehman. He's the pastor of Holy Family American National Catholic Church. That's independent. It's connected with the American National Catholic Church, but not with the former Roman Catholic diocese. Emphasis of welcoming, inclusive approach, He initially joined Alexian Brothers, a Roman Catholic order focused on care of the sick. Thereafter, he worked with troubled people around different places in the streets, got a master's of social work in 1975, and then became an ordained deacon and eventually a priest in the Catholic Church. And as I say, he also has a doctorate in psychology, and his church is not related to the Roman Catholic Church. And let's see, I think I misplaced my Reverend K.C. Bell.
How about if we have him? How about if we have him introduce himself?
Great.
Hi, I'm Reverend Ali, like Muhammad Ali, Casey Bell. And I am the minister at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Las Cruces down on South Solano. I just have been here a little under 6 months. I'm new to this congregation. Before that, I was the minister of congregational life and engagement at Cedar Lane Unitarian Universalist Church in Bethesda, Maryland. I have a master's of social work and a master's in divinity, and I'm an ordained fellowship UU minister. Our congregation really believes in the justice, equity, and inclusion of people, and we do a lot of work in the community to live out that value.
Okay, and Zach Egan is an atheist and a secular therapist here in Cruces. So that rounds out our.
I didn't realize that we have to comply bios and everything.
Go for it, dude. Then what else you do?
Sorry, I was just asked if I could come panel and then I got nothing else. So I didn't realize that there were whole like bios. But yeah, so I also have my master's in clinical social work. I'm a therapist here in town. I'm a registered secular therapist, and I provide services for people who are healing from religious trauma. I'm also connected with just about every like leftist organization in town. If there's a progressive group, I'm probably in it, and you'll probably see my face around. Let's see, I'm working towards my PhD. I haven't gotten in yet, but working there. Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you, Zach.
Okay, so as I said earlier, the first round is what is Christian nationalism? And so we'd like each panelist, and let's start for this round. Let's start with Father Lehman, and then move this way.
I almost want to stand up.
Frame.
Should I stand up?
Yeah.
Hi, good evening. I'm used to standing up. As I began to research this, and I was sort of horrified with some of when I went back in history of the things that the
wave the microphone.
sure, absolutely. I can wave this around. The traumas that the Christianity has inflicted upon the earth, basically. Going back to the time of Constantine, because it went from an underground church where in that underground church, the first 200 years, or 300 years, 2 million people were killed in the Colosseum and other places. And then it became a state religion. You know, and then you had all sorts of things like the Inquisition, the 30 Years' War. 30 Years' War, 8 million people, 50% of the population of Germany died during that time, and some of it the land has never recovered. 8 million people in those 30 years, and then shortly after that, they came to this country, had the colonies, but go back a second. Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. My kingdom is not of this world." Then we have the colonies, and believe it or not, a number of the founders of this country were deists. They were not Christian. They weren't Jewish. They were deists who did not believe in any sort of organized religion. And so they wanted a separation of church and state. So we go from that to now we have Christian nationalism in that same sort of really dark history where you have, so Christian nationalism is about power. You know, it's not about faith. It really doesn't recognize you. I don't recognize some of what goes on as Christian. But so when you attack your neighbor, when you attack the immigrant, I can give you multiple scriptural passages which say that's not okay. That's not what we're about. But somehow we've gotten to there because I think as human beings, we get broken, giving us a break. And so we want power so that we are safe. But that's an abuse, in my mind, abuse of Christianity. And it's very dangerous. So if you look at all those things that happen in the name of God, how many of you know the Fourth Crusade was to drive the Christians out of Constantinople? Right? A lot of people don't know that. That's why the Fourth Crusade was about. And so Christians were on both sides from everything from St. Francis going in to talk to the Sultan and try to end some of this to Christians actually stirring up the pot and causing it. So anyway, so the 30 Years' War, if you may not know, is that people, one country would be Catholic, the next one would be Lutheran, and they'd switch sides and they killed everybody who had converted. So that's how you got this horrible sort of thing. Some people said that the population of Europe decreased probably by 40–50%. And then they began to come here wanting to form their colonies, and they had to figure out how to work together to fight off the British. And that's what became. And so we were founded as a separation of church and state, not something to try to oppress because someone was a different color than us, who were someone LGBT. Just out of curiosity, do you know what the pink triangle comes from? What? The pink triangle. How many know the history? Mm-hmm. Pink triangle had to do with the folks in the concentration camps and who are gay. And you may not know this part of the story, is that when the American soldiers came and they figured out what the triangle was, you know what they did with the ones who with the pink triangle? They put them in prison because they must have done something wrong. And so the people began to rip off the pink triangle so no one could recognize them. So half of the people in the concentration, and probably Hitler was the biggest Christian nationalist, but half the people were not Jewish. So around 5–6 million were Jewish, and the other half were not. About 5 million or so. They were Seventh-day Adventists. They were so the danger of combining religion with power, with state, is extremely dangerous. All right.
Thank you.
Good evening. Many American men, especially young boys. Hi.
Bill McCamley.
Yeah. Many American men, especially young ones, are feeling hurt, lonely, frustrated, and angry. I'm going to read you some stats. First, we'll start with education. Girls are much more likely to graduate from high school in current American society, 89% to 84%. 70% of valedictorians in the last year were girls. Some boys go through their entire school process without seeing a male teacher or role model until they maybe get to high school and have a football coach. There are numerous programs out there for girls for STEM, business, politics, etc., and so on, without equivalent programs for boys. A friend of mine, Brandon, has a middle school daughter and high school son. He said, Bill, my daughter has all these support mechanisms for whatever she wants to do. You know what my son has? Football. Women are more accepted into college. The entrance rate now is about 60% to 40%. And since men are more likely to drop out, the graduation rates are roughly 2/3, 1/3. There are over 250 gender and women's studies programs at United States colleges and universities, and there are 4 times as many scholarships for women as there are for men. Women now make up a majority of the students in both medical school at 55% and law school at 56%, and both gaps are widening every year. Moving on to economics. Working class men have seen their overall wage growth bottom out. They are the only group in the United States right now who are doing worse than their fathers. There are now 40 million American men out of the workforce. That is not unemployment. That is people sitting on their couch that are not looking for work. The lowest rates of employment are with young white men, at 70%, and Black men at 69%. 52% of young men live with their parents. Only 26% of young women do. The amount of bachelor's degrees are obviously going to more women than men. And when they graduate, women are getting more jobs because they're choosing the jobs in healthcare, teaching, social work, all the jobs that robots and AI are not replacing. Men, on the other hand, factory work is going to robots. Computer science job, 25% of entry-level computer science jobs last year replaced by AI. The wage gap for 25 to 34-year-olds in this country is now gone. In culture, many men see their spaces going away. VFW halls, union halls, barbershops, bowling alleys, they're all going away. And the spaces that men and boys used to have together, Boy Scouts, YMCAs, they're now co-rec, while women's spaces like the Girl Scouts and YWCA are still around. 78% of bachelor's holders and 85% of working class folks were married in 1965. That number has dropped precipitously to 52% of college degree holders are male, and only 44% of working class voters, of both sexes, are married. And that matters because when women aren't married, they tend to work more. When men aren't married, they tend to have less motivation to go find work. American men identify as conservative at 41%, 37% identify as moderate, only 20% are liberal. 46% of young men believe that feminism is about favoring women over men, and only 37% disagree. In politics, Dem pollster Ann Greenberg, she basically said last year, the Democratic Party is the women's party. And men see newspaper articles with headlines like, feminism isn't enough, it's time we demand male oppression, that was in the Oakland Post, and why can't we hate men, a column from the Washington Post from a few years ago. Many straight men, especially young ones, are feeling left behind by schools, work, women, and they see the places that they gather being diminished. So where do they turn? They turn to church. Until recently, women always went to church more, and that is now reversing. More than a quarter of men born after the year 2000 now claim to be weekly churchgoers, and they look at the Bible a lot more. Furthermore, the types of churches that they're going to are not represented up here at this panel. They are conservative Catholic churches that still use Latin and right-wing evangelical churches. And there was a conservative pastor named Dwight Longenecker who said that they are attracted to the mendicant life where large families, classical schools, and dynastic orthodoxy are accepted, and the rainbow politics and ideologies that have poisoned and weakened so much of the Catholic Church over 30 years are put away. They are interested in guys like J.D. Vance, who believes that women are only happy when they were married with kids. He thinks that divorce is too easy and that women in violent marriages should not get divorced, that rape women who get pregnant should always have to give birth to their rapist kids, and he calls rape inconvenient. He is supported by guys like Peter Thiel, who literally sees The Handmaid's Tale not as a warning, but as a goals document. He said that women getting the right to vote is one of the biggest reasons we can't be optimistic about politics. He wrote an essay saying, I no longer believe freedom and democracy are compatible, and a book that said monarchy is the best form of government. Vance is also supported by a Notre Dame religious professor named Peter Deneen, who openly asked Donald Trump to do regime change. He has a book called Regime Change, where he believes we need basically a dictatorship of religious ideology to do well in America. So let's be clear. A lot of American men, especially young straight ones, are feeling left out of society. They are feeling not wanted by the left. And where do they go? They go to a place where people say that you are worth something and you have value and we want you. And that is a lot of these institutions that we're going to talk about today that then use that energy, that anger, and that frustration to fuel a political ideology that wants women not to have the right to vote, not to have control of their own healthcare, not to be able to get divorced, and so that men only have power. And in fact, Pete Hegseth, a few months ago, retweeted a video from some conservative pastors in Idaho who said that they believed that we should not have voting anymore for every person, that we should get rid of the 19th Amendment, and we should only have household voting like they do in their churches, where the head of the household, i.e. the husband, has the right to vote. At the heart of it, that is one of the things that is fueling the rise of Christian nationalism in today's society.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you very
Please introduce yourselves.
Of course, my name is Efraín Belmontes, current pastor at El Calvario. Here I go. Christian nationalism relies on historical narratives of the United States that claims Christians were the founders of this country and therefore should have the easiest access to civil rights, social benefits, and political power. It asserts that the US should remain a Christian nation. Christian nationalism seeks to merge a particular expression of Christianity with American national identity and uses political power, law, and culture to enforce that identity. This is not the same as Christianity, nor is it simply religious people participating in public life. Christian nationalism is a political ideology that uses religious language to justify exclusion, hierarchy, and state power. As a Hispanic lay pastor in the United Methodist Church, my perspective on Christian nationalism is shaped by life experience. For many in the Latinx community, Christianity has been a source of resilience, dignity, and hope, not dominion. Yet Christian nationalism increasingly appears even within the Latinx Christian spaces. One of the crucial examples is the the Latino megachurch, Pastor Guillermo Maldonado of El Rey Jesus in Miami, who in January, for those who remember, in 2020, hosted a Trump campaign event during the bilingual worship service and pray for the president, blending religious ritual with political endorsement. This matters because Christian nationalism has been historically center-white Anglo expressions of Christianity, but now recruits people of color into its project. Christian nationalism shows up in churches when faith is confused with patriotism, when political leaders are portrayed as divinely chosen, and when loyalty to political ideologies is elevated above core Christian teachings like humility, compassion, and care for the vulnerable. It discourages questioning, silence, dissent, and replaces the gospel with a narrative of power and control. In the last minute that I have, maybe, Christian nationalism differs from healthy expressions of faith. Here I go. This is a list, okay? On religious and public life, healthy faith encourages people to vote their conscience and respect others' beliefs. Christian nationalism claims real Americans are Christians and seeks to exclude others in school and education and school. Healthy faith supports families advocating their values while honoring public schools for all. Christian nationalism pushes Bible instructions, prayer in classrooms, or bans books that challenges its narrative. In law and policy, health faith advocates for justice using civic language and respects the rule of law. Christian nationalism demands law follow biblical law and privileges one religious group. On religious freedom, healthy faith depends liberty for all. Christian nationalism restricts freedom to Christians and justifies discrimination. On national identity and patriotism, healthy faith loves its country while acknowledging its flaws. Christian nationalism equates Christianity with patriotism and sanctifies power. On disagreement and democracy, healthy faith accepts disagreement, should accept disagreement, and engages in dialogue and peaceful advocacy. Christian nationalism frames opponents as enemies of God and sees compromises as betrayal. In closing, Christian nationalism is not about deep faith or sincere belief. It is a political ideology that uses religion to claim power, define belonging, and silence difference. Thank you.
Zach Egan?
Alrighty, mine's gonna be kind of short and sweet. I think everybody has covered quite a lot here. But at the end of the day, right, what is Christian nationalism? Christian nationalism is a belief system that is born out of racism.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Yes,
Wow.
that's fine. You can go ahead and have your opinion for right now. Keep it to yourself. When we have our question and answer, you can say that's whack. But not now. You're not going to interrupt. No one will interrupt any of the panelists. Ground rule number one. Please continue.
Thank you. Yes, so as was mentioned, right, the United States was founded on the principle of separation of church and state. However, as we moved towards like the Civil War era and the South wanted to maintain slavery, we turned it into a form of white supremacy, right? This is where a lot of Christian nationalism was really born in the United States. It was born out of racism. It's also born out of patriarchy, right? A lot of Christian nationalism is born out of the belief that the man is the head of the house, and ideally a white man is the head of the house. So, sorry, I'm confuddled. So, right, we have these patriarchal structures, we have these white supremacist structures that are built very much into Christian nationalism. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's built into Christianity. It means it's built into Christian nationalism. This idea that the ideal race is white, that the ideal person is a man, and that that ideal man is heterosexual. And this is a means of control and power and oppression, and it is fed by fear. Christian nationalism comes from a foundation of fear of loss of power. It comes from a foundation of a fear of no longer being at the top. And it has been co-opted into political structure to help maintain that power. We saw a lot of this happen, especially during the 80s, right? With especially Reagan and especially Nixon. That this was brought in and they saw that, hey, we have these evangelical Christians that we could bring in, that we could get on our side, that we could turn into voter base. And they found talking points that this voter base would really latch onto, and they turned it into an identity. And Christianity went from something that you do with your community, something that you do in your own home, to a national political stage. And that's where we are now. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Wilson Feltz. I'm the pastor at Morning Star. I do have some Morning Star peeps here tonight. I'm going to start with a story. Last year, just before the presidential election, I facilitated a discussion at Morningstar about faith and politics. And in the discussion, one of my beloved church members, whom I truly adore and respect her ability to ask hard questions, raised a hand and said, "What do you have against soldiers?" I was befuddled by that because I don't have anything against soldiers. I'm very grateful for people who serve in our military forces and for their families and for the sacrifice that requires. And so I asked, "What do you mean? You know, what are you actually asking?" And she said, "Well, you never let us sing patriotic songs in church." And I do have a problem with patriotic songs in church. And it's not just the battle hymn of the Republic, it's things like "Onward, Christian Soldiers Marching as to War." That's not my understanding of what it means to follow Jesus. And so we had a discussion about that difference. And I don't know if she agrees with me now or not, but hopefully she understands a little bit better about where I'm coming from because I'm a pastor, I'm a clergy person, an ordained clergy person in the United Methodist Church, an expression of Christianity. And I don't like to use the word Christian to talk about myself because we have reached this place where you can call yourself Christian and not follow Jesus. So I'm much more concerned about what it means to follow Jesus than I am with Christianity and the title Christian. The problem here is not followers of Jesus who want to be politically active. That's a good and healthy thing. The problem is when a certain brand of Christianity is conflated with politics. That's what we're really fighting against here. My concern is a Christianity that doesn't look anything like following Jesus. As others have said up here, Christian nationalism did not appear overnight. I was also going to pick on Reagan. Reagan's alliance with Jerry Falwell and others to mobilize the voter base using Christian values has just continued. And it's been compounded by politicians today as well. So over time, faith language has become a way to manipulate voters. And so the identity has shifted into a political one for many people who call themselves Christian, not for all of us. So Christian nationalism is not about people of faith being involved in politics. It's the belief that the United States belongs to a certain kind of Christian. And it's the belief that God favors the US over any other nation. And it's the belief that the government should protect or enforce that specific version of Christianity. So it's a mixture of faith and national identity and political power. We've heard that word tonight into one thing. And anytime religion and government come together, it becomes a bad thing for people who are vulnerable. It becomes about who's in and who's out. And the way I understand the teachings of Jesus and what it means to follow Jesus, who's in and who's out, is something that Jesus pushed against, right? It's about inclusion. Faith and following Jesus is about making sure that we're caring for the vulnerable. If you read the prophets, anytime God is mad, anytime the prophet is sent to talk to the people, why is God mad?
Justice.
Injustice, right? Because the people have forgotten that they were blessed to be a blessing. So if we're going to follow Jesus, then we need to be concerned about policies that care for the most vulnerable among us. And Christian nationalism does not do that.
Thank you all for holding this conversation, bringing faith and democracy and Christian nationalism into the same space. It really matters as we are today. I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister, and one clarification feels important at the outset. In my tradition, faith is not defined by belief in a specific ruling deity. Faith is defined by what we orient our lives toward, what we trust, what we value, and how we live together. Unitarian Universalism is a value-centered faith, not a belief-centered one. We are grounded in love and expressed through shared values of justice and equity, interdependence, pluralism, generosity, and transformation. Some Unitarian Universalists are Christian and Buddhist and pagan and Jewish and theist and non-theist. And what holds us together is not shared theology, but shared values and mutual accountability for how we live them. And that means many atheists and agnostics are people of deep faith, faith in human dignity, faith in justice, faith in shared responsibility. Democracy itself depends on this kind of faith, not belief in God, but trust in one another across difference. Christian nationalism challenges this understanding at its core. It is not simply a personal religious conviction. It is a political ideology that collapses faith into belief into a single religious authority and then uses that belief to justify power. When that happens, pluralism becomes a threat, dissent becomes disobedience, and entire groups of people are treated as morally illegitimate. One reason that Christian nationalism feels so coordinated is because it has been. One place we see this clearly is in the Seven Mountain Mandate, a framework that emerged in the late 20th century, evangelical and charismatic circles, and is often associated with leaders like Bill Bright and Lauren Cunningham. It teaches that Christians are called to take control of key areas of society, government, education, media, family, business, and culture in order to shape the nation according to a single religious vision. And that is what we're seeing now. When that framework moves from influence to dominion, pluralism becomes a threat, dissent becomes disobedience, and entire groups of people are treated as morally illegitimate. That is why this conversation matters, not to debate belief, but to protect democracy and the freedom of conscience for everyone.
Thank you.
Let's start over there. Great start. Our next segment is basically the impact on democracy and community of Christian nationalism. How does it affect local governance? How does it affect pluralism, education, minorities? So what are its effects? And we'll start with the Reverend Bell and move this way.
All right, well, I'll just continue what I wrote then. I also want to name what happens when we allow the phrase people of faith to be co-opted by those seeking control. That doesn't serve religion and it doesn't serve democracy. It tells people who were harmed by religion or who never themselves believed in religion or saw themselves reflected in religious language that they don't belong in the moral conversation. But if you're doing the work of democracy, and this gets to the question, showing up and taking responsibility, defending dignity, caring for your neighbors, you are doing the work of faith in democracy, even if you don't use religious language, and even if you have left a tradition that has harmed you. It's not owned by a particular institution, faith. Faith is not something that we just say we do. And having faith in democracy means that we have faith in pluralism. We have faith in difference. We have a way to live in a covenanted way to get to what we believe this country was meant to be. And when we reclaim that truth, we strengthen both democracy and the moral life of our communities. The question before us is not whether faith belongs in public life or democracy belongs in faith. It always has been. Whether we'll use it to widen our sense of responsibility or to narrow who counts as important to us. When we talk about the breakdown of pluralism as part of our democratic process or dissent or disagreement, we talk about how people often are willing to go to the corners, their corners, and sit there and kind of pout and want it to be their way. And the thing about democracy is it's a great compromise. It's a great compromise. It is a great institution of compromise where what we are hoping will happen is that everyone will rise together. That was the point of the whole experiment, supposedly, without the racism, the sexism, and homophobia and truth. But that's the point of it, right? That's what we're working towards. So when we work from a Christian nationalist lens, we favor people and then other people are othered. And that's what we're seeing. We have to, as people of democracy and people of faith, become organized in the ways that we care for each other, become organized in the ways that we allow disagreement within our own spaces, become organized in the ways that we talk about what it means to be people of faith.
Thank you.
In the Christian circles where I grew up, pluralism is a dirty word. I think it's really important that we understand that democracy depends on pluralism. And that's just the idea that we have different beliefs and understandings and viewpoints and perspectives. And we actually are stronger when we learn to listen to each other, and we can find solutions that actually benefit everyone and not just a few favored, as you were just saying. And what that can look like if we go too far. If we go too far in silencing voices, if we silence voices at all, then we begin to treat disagreement as disloyalty. And that becomes very dangerous. And we begin to limit the stories that are told. We start banning books, which has already been mentioned. And that limits our scope and our understanding of what it means to be human. And it turns education into a battleground instead of a shared good for all people. And it can influence voters as well, as voters are encouraged to listen to the values of a candidate rather than the policies that are being expressed and the effects of those policies on the vulnerable. And candidates will begin to speak of themselves as the Christian choice rather than getting to the matters that really make a difference, and in terms of children being fed, right? And people having homes. So when it becomes about Christian values, we lose sight of the needs of people in our communities. And faith communities, I know we're going to get to this later, but faith communities can have the opportunity to really reshape that conversation. So we're talking about people and their needs and not about values that are used to mobilize outcomes based on maintaining power for those who already have it.
Alrighty. Yeah, so one of the first things, does anybody know what the number one like answer to religion is on most polls? Like how people identify as far as religion goes? None. Exactly. That is the number one growing answer to the polls when people are asked what religion do you identify as? So at least here in the United States. So really, the majority of people in the United States are no longer identifying with religion. However, we have a very vocal minority that are coming up and trying to say, like, this is what things need to look like. And again, kind of what things need to look like is we need a white Christian male at the head of our country. And really at the head of all of our spaces. Right. This is what's growing in our political spheres, especially in more conservative political spheres. And the reason I bring this up is because we're talking about threats to democracy. When we look at what a lot of these different groups want, right, we're seeing wanting to take away voting rights from certain people. We're seeing wanting to take away or disenfranchising minority groups that they feel don't align with their faith. And when you put people in power who take rights away from others, it's not good, right? We're supposed to be able to represent everybody in our country, not just one singular group. Our country is built on diversity. Our country is built on being able to share what you think. We have freedom of speech, right? And as soon as you get these individuals in power, a lot of that starts going away. And that's a little bit what I have to say as far as like threats to democracy go. But one of the other things I really want to bring up is something that like Christian nationals are actually very good at. Christian nationals are very good at creating third spaces. Is everybody familiar what third spaces are? No?
No.
So third spaces are the areas where we can get together that are outside of work or home. Right? And in our country, there are not a lot of third spaces. You know, for example, like shopping malls are a third space, right? Those are declining across the country. We still have one here, but it's because we're about like 20 years behind the rest of the country. And even our mall here still has empty store spaces, right? In other countries, they have market squares. They have, and we have public parks here. But if you've ever been outside of the United States and gone to a public park, what do you see?
Trees.
Yeah. Besides the trees,
People playing chess.
exactly.
Dominoes.
You see people. There are people out everywhere. They're talking, they're communing, they're connecting. They are building community. We don't have those as many spaces here. And so a lot of our third spaces are on the decline. A lot of our communities are on the decline. And it ties into something like what Bill was saying earlier about like the loneliness epidemic. And I know he was talking mostly about like the male loneliness. However, we also know that women are actually more likely to feel lonely. They're just not as vocal about it. We all feel lonely, right? We are all struggling with loneliness in this country. And I think that this is really the ultimate end goal of the hyper individualistic culture that we push forward. Right? We have these ideals about like pull yourself up by your bootstraps, be your own person, be a self-made man, right? We hear this a lot, and it's all about isolation. It's all about being singular. It's all about being just yourself. And we push away a lot of community. And again, I think one of the things that Christian nationalism actually does well is they create these third spaces where people can come together, where they can connect, where they can, form relationships, and they're forming community. Now, that's not to say it's necessarily a good thing in this instance, right? But I bring it up because that's something that we also need to be doing. We need to be creating third spaces. We need to be creating spaces where we are getting together and building community, supporting community, and making connections. Because that's how we are going to combat, and I know that's a later section, but if we're going to talk about community, let's talk about community. Yeah, so that's what I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Christian nationalism affects democracy and community by shaping how people understand who belongs in civic life. It challenges pluralism by framing certain religions' identities as the true American identity, which can marginalize non-Christians, non-traditional Christians, and other minority communities. As Nietzsche might suggest, when one belief declares itself the only truth, alternative voices are silenced. And with them, the laughter of pluralism dies, leaving a space where exclusion and even violence can thrive. I see Christian nationalism jeopardizes democracy at all levels, in all aspects. Today in Minneapolis, a woman was shot by ICE. Her voice was silenced on her attempt to protect the immigrant community. In education, Christian nationalism pressures the schools to teach a narrow version of history, limit curricula, or impose religious practices. In local governance, it can push city councils, schools, boards, and commissions to adopt policies based on particular religious worldviews rather than the needs of the whole community. It also shapes voters and candidates, encouraging alignment with Christian nationalist ideals over policy or civic competence. Faith communities plays a dual role, okay? Some faith communities enable it by endorsing candidacy or framing civic duty as religious obligation, while others resisted by defending pluralism, religious freedom, and policies that serve to the common good. These counterweights are essential for keeping democracy inclusive in faith enriching rather than controlling.
So I had three responses to this question that Peter had in how Christian nationalism relates to government. I think it's the only person who was in elected office up here. I'm going to talk to that. The first is this. When someone tells you that America was founded in a Christian nation, as a Christian nation, tell them the truth, which is this. The first European immigrants that came over to the United States were basically fleeing 300 years of Protestants and Catholics killing each other like crazy in Europe. Over 300 years. In just one of those wars, the 30 Years' War in Germany, 1/3 of the population died because of religious war. So the people that founded this country knew what was going on there because they had just heard about it. And they formed this country with checks on that system so that people could worship freely. You want to have some facts? Let's do it. George Washington, guy in your $1 bill, first president, in his farewell address, specifically called for tolerance of everyone's religion in this country. The second president, John Adams, signed a treaty that ended the war with Tripoli, you know, the one that we sing about in the battle or the Marine song. And it said specifically, signed by the second president of the United States, the government of the United States is not in any sense formed as a Christian religion. The third and fourth presidents, Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, both specifically fought government establishment of religion because they thought that funding churches with tax dollars screwed with people's ability to practice religion freely. And Benjamin Franklin, the guy on the $50 bill, also part of the Constitutional Convention, specifically said that we as the United States should not get government and religion entangled because he saw religious differences getting involved in government as a threat to the nation because of those 30 years war. So that's number one. Number two is this. As you all know, I've been doing this book on men. And one of the things that I have been researching is how people view women on this Christian nationalist religious right. There is a guy named John Eldridge who wrote a book that is kind of required reading in a lot of Sunday school classes called Wild at Heart Revised and Updated, Discovering the Secret of a Man's Soul. And in it, he specifically says that deep in his heart, every man longs for a battle to fight, an adventure to live, and a beauty to rescue. And in another book, he says that, where is it? Here we go. Women are beauties to rescue, fair maidens and damsels in distress. And the reason I say that is to say this. When we take away the humanity of women by saying wives must be submission to husbands or whatever, that translates to the policy world, Peter, like the question you asked. And here are some very specific ways that goes. Pulling out Roe versus Wade. I was in Texas when that happened. And what did you hear afterwards? There were women in parking lots bleeding to death because they could not get taken care of for their health care. Doctors refused to take care of them. But you want to talk abortion? Okay, let's go further than that. 5 states in this country have proposals to remove no-fault divorce. That was first done in California in the 70s to give women more freedom to get out of relationships. And what happened? Violence against women went down. Women's depression went down. Women's suicides went down. Murders of women went down. All those things were good things for women. And there are 5 states in this country wanting to take that away. Furthermore, as I said in the previous thing, there is a specific real attempt to get rid of the 21st Amendment. 19th Amendment. Nick Fuentes recently came out and said women shouldn't have the right to vote. Peter Thiel, one of the power brokers behind this current administration, has said that women having political power is one of the worst things that could happen in this country. That is real, and we need to fight against removing women's humanity in our government. The third thing I'll say is this. When people start saying that we should do things because of Christianity and the Bible, read the Bible to them. Then the king say to those on his right, come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me. Then the righteous will answer, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you as a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go visit you? The king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of these least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. So when people want to take healthcare benefits away from the poor, they want to take food benefits away from the poor, they want to tell people to go screw off in some foreign country who want to come here just to get a better life, you read them the Bible, because that's what Jesus said.
I guess to summarize, I think we need to know the Bible. We have to be not afraid to quote the Bible to those Christian nationalists and say that's not what Christ said. We also have to know our history, because if we don't know our history, we repeat the mistakes of the past. And so the other thing that I heard from the panelists is that we have to figure out how to create community. I mean, churches try to do that, but we have to figure out how to create community and include all sorts of people into that community. Because community is the foundation of the family and life and everything that we do. Let me give one anecdotal story. I was on vacation in Puerto Penasco. And I'm sitting around the pool. It's a true story. Sitting around the pool, and there was a teenage boy there and his little brother, and dad was over here. And the teenage boy wanted to help his brother with something. The dad shouts out, "You are not your brother's keeper." I thought I was going to have a stroke. Or I thought I was going to jump out of my skin and jump into the pool and say, what in God's name are you doing? We are our brother's keeper. People quote that so many times wrong. For those who may not know, Cain killed Abel, and God comes and says, where's your brother? And Cain says, I'm not my brother's keeper. And God said, yes, you are. We are our brother's keeper. The foundation of Scripture is what Bill read. When I was hungry, you fed me. All the Scripture constantly says, what about the widows and the orphans and the immigrants? You know, how many of you are Native American? If not, we're all immigrants. And how do we stand up for the immigrants? But people, so like I said, we have to know our history, we have to know and our Scripture, and not be afraid to create community and create that dialogue with the people who are struggling.
So the final segment is what can we do? We need to keep to 3 minutes or less per panelist so that we have time for questions. And let's start with Father Lehman.
I think I gave mine. But yeah, I think we have to recognize this. If we're Christian, we have to practice it. We have to live it. The question is not saying that what they're doing is wrong. We have to look at what we're doing, and are we living our Scripture? and taking care of the widows and the orphans. I mean, often at church, I'll be quoting St. Paul and says, we're not male or female, Jew or Greek, slave or free, black or white, straight or gay. We are one people. You know, and it says in scripture that the kingdom of God, well, the kingdom of God isn't the Christians. The kingdom of God is everybody. And so we all have that spirit of life in us. We have to be not afraid. We have to figure out how to show that and challenge other people to say, that may be your understanding of scripture or your understanding of history. It's not mine.
For those of us on the left, we have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time in terms of our relationship with gender. I think for us gentlemen, it is absolutely critical for us to represent that for 500-600 years in this country, we've had the thumb on the scale in our favor in so many different ways. The law I use from that is it wasn't until 1988 that a woman could get a business loan in this country without a male cosigner. I was 10. I'm not that old, okay? I know I'm bald, but I'm not that old. However, I think we also have to understand that a lot of young men in this country don't see it that way. They come up in a school system where they don't have male mentors. They see an education system that women have all of these structural things that are helping them. They don't see where the help is. They see a system where you go into the job force and they're seeing women do better than them, being able to move out of their parents' house. Let's be real honest. If I'm a guy, if I'm one of those 52% of young men living at home, how the hell am I going to ask a girl on a date if I got to take her back to my parents' house, right? So what do we got to do? Locally, we got to change our zoning to allow for more, I'm serious, to more affordable housing. That is the number one concern men have. Number one in this country. And it's one of the biggest reasons sometimes I don't vote left because they see all these old environmentalists who are saying don't build more and they're left out, right? So we have to provide a space where we can say, hey, look, you are a person to be recognized and understood and not a problem to solve. And then the guys, we have to understand what that means for us over time. There is a way for us to do both. We need to do that. Okay. Secondly, from a local government standpoint, I think it's super important for us to, with our school systems, are we recruiting more male teachers? Are there gentlemen out here who can be role models? That is one of the biggest things I hear over and over and over again. If you look at big brothers and big sisters, there are always more women who are willing to be mentors to girls in the Big Sisters program, and they always have an overflow. On the other side, there are always not enough men to mentor young boys and men. How are we creating more mentors and more spaces? And then the last thing I would say from a local government situation is let's look at things like the universities who keep, over the last 40 years, the cost of tuition at universities has doubled the cost of inflation in the country. A lot of young men are seeing that it is not worth my time to go to college. So that means two things. Number one, I'm not going into a space to be exposed to people different than me in a way that I can see things. And number two, I'm going to make less money because even now, if you get a bachelor's degree, you make more money over the course of your lifetime than even an associate's degree or an apprenticeship, a lot of cases. How do we make that more affordable and accessible for young men? Give them hope, give them a place to go for the future, and they're going to be less likely to have to turn to people that say, we're going to take your anger and your resentment and your loneliness, and we're going to turn it to hatred against another person for a political ideology. If we can do those things, we can make a dent in this sucker. Thank you.
What can we do? In Las Cruces, our community is rich and diverse. Latin, Catholics, and Protestant, indigenous people, Muslims, Jews, and people of no faith. When we stand together, faith becomes a force of justice, for justice and inclusion, no division, and we affirm that caring for our neighbors is bigger than any one political or religious ideology. We also need bold civic and educational responses. This means defending public schools as spaces for all children. This means This means defending public schools as spaces for all children, advocating for inclusive and truthful curricula, and pushing for policies that protect marginalized communities. So here's the invitation. Artists, educators, and activists can contribute through art, music, flyers, documentary, dance, stand-up, public storytelling to expose and resist toxic nationalism, exclusionary patriotism, and systems of supremacy. I urge each of us to speak truth to power, both in private and public spaces, from synagogues, churches, through streets and community panels like this one, in the micro and macrosphere. So we challenge policies, rhetoric, practices that harm Black and Hispanic communities, women, LGBTQ plus immigrants, and others whose voices and bodies are marginalized. For those of us who are religious, let us remain embracing pluralism and diversity as essential. Christianity, like any other faith, is diverse, and no single expression should dominate public life, neither justify oppression, colonialism, and modern slavery. I strongly believe, as a religious leader, that when we act together across faith, culture, and identities, we ensure that religious strengthens democracy, protects human dignity, and builds communities rooted in justice, equity, and care for every neighbor.
Alrighty, real quick, I just want to amend something I said in the last section. I mentioned really quickly that like the United States was, founded on diversity. That's not real. That's an ideal that we're taught, and I think it's an ideal that we should strive for. And my brain just threw everything together into one thing. So
Thank you.
I apologize for that. Thank you for letting me amend that. As far as what do we do, right, about Christian nationalism? Does anybody know the difference between a cult and a religion? Membership numbers. Not even necessarily a leader, right? What's that?
One is private, one is public.
No, like I said, it's membership. Membership numbers is what differentiates a cult from a religion. Both use the same tactics to recruit members. Sometimes the outcome is good. Sometimes the outcome is not so good. But a lot of people turn to these sorts of groups because of fear, because of loneliness, and because they feel like they're ostracized. And when you go somewhere, a lot of these groups tend to use love bombing, right? Anybody know what love bombing is? Yeah.
Define.
All right, love bombing is when you are hit with nothing but support and love and kindness and care and all of these things all at once very quickly. I don't know if anybody has even like a positive church, right? Where we do see some positive outcomes. If it's your first time going, how many people come up and say, "Hi, how are you? Oh, I'm so happy to see you here. We love that you're here," right? That's technically love bombing. This is something that we need to take account for, is that there is a lot of indoctrination at play with a lot of what's going on here. And they're using the same tactics. And at the end of the day, me talking to somebody who disagrees with me is not going to change their mind. It doesn't necessarily work that way. Me getting angry, me having an argument, me having even like a friendly discussion is not going to change anybody's mind. But you know what does change people's minds? Mutual aid. When we have communities where we're helping each other, when we have communities where we are welcoming, people are more likely to listen. If I have conservative friends. I have, well, not necessarily friends anymore, but I've had Christian national friends. And before this most recent election, and I decided, you know what, if you're going to maintain these thought processes, I don't want to be around you anymore. We would have barbecues and we'd get together and I would talk about like, oh man, you know, I'm really struggling with this, or oh man, this person is really, really affected by this policy that was passed by this person who's identifying as a Christian national. And they go, huh, you know what? That makes sense. I see that. I hear that. Right? But it comes from a group where we help each other, where we're working for each other, where we're supporting each other, where we're there for each other. And that ties back into what I was saying earlier about community. We really, really, really need community. We need third spaces. We need spaces where we're able to bridge these gaps, where we're able to work with one another, where we're able to support each other, where we're able to like actually love one another. Because without that, things start to fall apart. We start to go into like our tribal identities, right? This is my group, that's your group, and if we get too close, we'll kill each other. And we can't have that. It doesn't work. And again, we can't be arguing. Don't waste your breath. Don't waste your energy. Don't waste your time trying to convince somebody to believe what you believe. It's not going to work, right? So we work on connecting. We work on having relationships. And then we can maybe slowly start pulling the threads. And we also know at the end of the day, the number one thing to like help combat prejudice. There we go. The number one thing that helps you fight prejudice is exposure to different ideas. Colleges do not turn people left. What turns people left is they go to college and they meet new people with very diverse ideas from very diverse backgrounds. And all of a sudden their eyes are opened. Right? This is what helps people open their eyes. Thank you.
What we can do is build relationships across difference, which is what we're all saying in some way or another. And I think Interfaith Alliance is really important in that. And that includes people who identify as none. Las Cruces has a great Interfaith Alliance. I confess that I'm not strongly associated with them as I would like to be, but I think that's a great place to start. We learn from each other and we hear from each other and we recognize that as human beings, we have much more in common than we have a difference.
Well, Reverend Deanie said one thing that I was going to say. It's awesome. What can we do? I think that we can start by including everyone in the conversation and remembering that we must hold the fullness of humanity in our words and deeds. We didn't get to see that sometimes on our panel today, and we can all do better with that. So what do I mean by that? That means that we consider boys who love boys as well as boys who love girls and boys who love people who are not boys or girls. We consider women who are women and women who love women, and you get the point. So it's a practice though. It's not something we all just are like, oh yeah, I know how to do this now. We practice it every day, and we practice it because we want to bring everyone along with us, because we rise and we fall together. So it's a practice just like any other thing, just like going outside and walking every day when you don't feel like it in the desert heat. It's a practice. Another thing that we can do is that we can work on education and literacy. We heard that here today. We can promote religious literacy in our religious communities that talks about civic spaces and that create other third spaces that are not necessarily in our communities, but of our communities, so that people feel comfortable and they understand what it means to be civic and also what it means to be religious, they can distinguish faith from political ideology. We defend the separation of church and state as a protection for religion, ensuring faith remains voluntary, accountable, and diverse. We model healthy faith communities by engaging in public engagement that is grounded in humility and accountability and care for the common good. Because democracy does not require theological agreement, it requires agreement that no single faith gets to rule everyone.
That's right.
Been a wonderful panel. Interested in having people briefly and collegially and courteously ask questions or make comments or tell us what you think about it.
Go ahead, Daniel. Keep it brief.
I grew up in West Texas at a time when you didn't hear about America first. We hear a lot about it now. We hear about it from the current occupant of the White House. And it's not a new thing. As a matter of fact, does anybody know where that phrase first came into being in this country? It came from people who wore hoods and white sheets and burned crosses. That's where America first originated. And so what I encourage people to do is every opportunity you get to meet new people of different backgrounds, every opportunity you get to travel from different places. I grew up in a tiny little town in West Texas, but I've traveled all over the world, and it was the best decision I ever made. When I decided to go to seminary, I went to Boston University and then Harvard Divinity School. And that expanded my horizons so that I didn't become or stay the little redneck kid from Seymour, Texas, back in the 50s and 60s and 70s. So if you get an opportunity to broaden your horizons and your perspective, take advantage of it. And we need to do this. And I really appreciated what Bill and some others said today about we do need to recognize that there are people in our society who are marginalized. And I agree, it's a lot of males. It's a lot of young men. And we need to do things to bring them into the fold and not give up on people.
Thank
We
you.
have to keep the faith.
I have Elise up first.
Buenas noches. Thank you to all the panelists. I think there was one thing that was missing, and that is that it's politics that is moving Christian nationalism. And we need to, all of us need to make a commitment to register to vote and to get as many people as possible to vote. We also need to support all of those candidates, because on the bottom line, we can have the greatest little communities all over the world, all over our country, all over our city. If we don't vote the right people down, that Christian nationalism is going to happen.
I'd also like to thank the panel, and I really appreciate the stats that you gave, Bill, on the young men. And I don't mean this as a slight to this group here, but look at all of us at our age. So where are the young people, and how do we really engage? And I agree with this speaker here that, we've got to get out and vote, encourage the young people to get involved. And that's what I like to say.
And believe it or not, there are young people that are involved. We just don't have to hang with them. Right?
Yeah, when you were talking about the third spaces,
Right there.
when you were talking, oh, wow. When you were talking about the third spaces, it's very interesting. I've never heard of that before. Okay, but with the internet being as pervasive as it is, and frankly, we see the wedges that it can drive and is driving in society in general. I don't know how you overcome that, because it seems to me you can be turned into a zealot pretty much overnight. And it's a frightening thing. So the third space is a great idea if you can get people to go out and do the whole Boston green thing. That'd be great.
Thank you. I'm just going down each line, okay? I'll be with you. Bill, go ahead.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point, and I would say two things in response with the research that I've been doing. You saw all the people pissed off when Taylor Swift was on the TV for like 45 seconds at a time with the Travis Kelce stuff. You guys all see that?
Yeah.
Right? I think a lot of men are seeing, hey, football is one of the last things I have. And now you're trying, no, I'm serious. And now you're trying to take that too. You saw this with video games. In 2014, there was a big thing called Gamergate, where a couple of women had some things and there were death threats and bomb threats and all that kind of stuff. So I think it is really critical that we find spaces for young men to be able to healthily work with one another again. And let me just throw something else at you with the internet that you may not know. A lot of production is going on right now to sell young men on AI girlfriends. 60 million of them were downloaded in the first 6 months of last year. And that's really dangerous for a couple of reasons. Number one, it takes you away from real life connections that actually make you feel happier. And number two, it creates this vision of what a woman should be. Because these computer programs will do whatever you want, whenever you want, tell you what to say, because they're not real fucking people. They're computer programs. And that's really dangerous because it once again goes into this kind of Christian nationalist viewpoint that women should be subjugated and guys grow up thinking that's real now. So we got to be watching out for that too.
This is the Whitney Houston way to talk. Okay, you talk like this. So if you're using the microphone, pretend you're Whitney Houston.
From what I've heard today, I've heard more about anti-Christian and anti-nationalism, more so than anti-nationalism. What I hear more is more anti-Christian and their values and what they have a right to speak and what they have a way of life. As most nationalists have their own demeanor of saying when one country has their own population of certain demographic, us as a country, we have our own demographic as well. And we should be allowed to express that as well. And we should have pride in that. As some people have black pride, some people have brown pride, some people should have Christian pride, and some people should have white pride as well. I don't mean that in the derogatory way or a discriminatory way or a racism way. I mean that everybody should be proud of their own skin and their own demographic. And so as American, we should have our own nationalism as well. Not necessarily in a discriminatory way, but we should be allowed to express ourselves without anybody telling us what we have our own freedom of speech to say.
Let me ask you a
So
quick,
from what I've heard today,
can I ask you a quick question?
From what I've heard today, is I've heard an anti-Christian way.
Um,
A whole this whole discriminatory kind of a way, as if we are called the cult. We're called the cult, and I won't say that in a way back towards you. I will say that it's a different opinion, and we should all have our own opinion. Go ahead.
I want to ask him a question.
Ask the question, please.
Agree with you. Of course, everybody should be proud of who they are and what they are. How do we prevent people and prevent ourselves from letting that go over the line to where we're excluding or putting down other people?
I want to express my religion and my holidays. As I went to the city hall today, I saw menorah there, and I don't have no thing against that as well. But I would say that if they're able to express and portray their religion holiday there, I should be able to do that amongst the city hall myself, right?
Which is what? Yeah. What do you want to?
I want to show a cross there. Maybe show a cross there. That's my Christian beliefs. That's
There was a Christmas tree.
no. Okay, a Christmas tree. I said a cross. I didn't say a Christmas tree. I said a cross.
Hold it. You say there are three what?
There are 3 crosses on City Hall. There are 3 crosses on the hill up there on Main Street. It is all over. You cannot go anywhere in this town without seeing a cross.
And what is the name of the community that we live in?
Las Cruces, the crosses.
Can I also want to say something really quick, because I think
What is
that's
the community?
pertinent.
Who knows? We're a diverse community. Okay.
Really quick, I just because I think it's important and pertinent, I want to point out.
Stop.
I'm a Christian. I'm a follower of Jesus Christ, and I'm a conservative. And I appreciate one of the panelists that said having a different viewpoint from other people isn't necessarily Christian nationalism. And I'm afraid that this is a bit of an echo chamber because I've been in other echo chambers on the other side and everything. But and there's some skewed, well, not skewed, but just some facts emphasized and other facts not balanced out. But I would hope that I appreciate the panelists. I thank them for the making that distinction, and be careful not to use Christian nationalists as a terminology to denigrate the other people in your community that are conservative, because I think that's important. And when you start calling everybody a fascist or everybody a Nazi, that leads to people like Charlie Kirk getting assassinated for just having free speech, maybe very different views than a lot of other people. But people shouldn't celebrate people being killed for expressing a different view. I don't think any. I think we all agree on that. Okay, so I would hope that the panelists and I would, if we lived in the time of William Wilberforce, if you don't know who that is, watch the movie Amazing Grace. He did more as a politician, like Bill. But he was firm in his faith, and he was a devout Christian, and he did more to end slavery around the whole world than anyone else in history, almost. And so that's a movie worth watching. But I will say that there was people that he came up against that did not believe people of a certain color were even human. We saw the same thing with the Jews in World War II. There were a group of people that thought they weren't human. And the gypsies, and we see that now with the unborn, the humans that have their own DNA, the unborns. And so I know that that's a minority opinion. People aren't going to agree with me in this room, but there might be a balance, maybe an area for compromise. But let's follow the science and think about what is a human.
Thank you so much. Zach, I believe you want to respond on a previous.
It's done. It's over.
Okay, it's done. It's over. Panelists have any more replies that they want to do?
Yeah, I just want
to invite that gentleman to contact me afterward, and we'll talk on radio. I will thoroughly disagree with you, but in a civil manner.
As one of the only non-Christians on the panel, I believe, I just wanted to point out a few things that sometimes I believe when we're all thinking our own thoughts, we don't hear what people say. So I want to remind you that I said, so when it's reported again, that faith at its best asks how we live ethically, care for one another, and remain accountable to something larger than ourselves. Of the Christians that I came from, that's what Christianity does. And the theological difference is that healthy faith traditions are grounded in humility, moral reflection, and responsibility to the common good. So as a Christian, if you ask yourself, is this what's happening? Is this what's happening in my faith tradition? Is this happening in my church? Then rock on.
Just to let you know, we kind of got started late. So if you don't mind, we're going to go for about 10 more minutes. Okay, so we got to keep this short.
I think we should go till they kick us out.
I just want to clarify one thing for myself, and I'm not speaking for anyone else. I do not equate every conservative Christian with a Christian nationalist.
I don't think any of us contend that.
I don't either, but I do want to make that clear.
I appreciate what you just said, man. I too am a follower of Christ. God gave us words to speak good. We need to use our words powerfully and for unity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, I've just been told by security that we have to be out of here now. So thank you all very much for attending. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me regarding Indivisible. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here.